Hi, I'm Dave Dinkel. Today on Deal Talk, we're going to talk about 10 wholesale deals completed in 10 consecutive days. What's so special about these 10 deals? After Hurricane Irma passed through our area, these deals were completed almost coincidentally on a daily basis. We had other deals that didn't close, another 10 as a matter of fact, but the reality is these came in the sequence. I put these together for a meeting that our REIA had. First one is a traditional double closing. What I've done on all of these HUDs is I've split them in half. Top half fitted on the screen so you can see it. Bottom half, so we have an A to B top, A to B bottom, and then a B to C top and a B to C bottom where applicable. In this case, purchase price was $160,000 for the property. All of these deals were no money whatsoever by the students involved in them. Top half of the A to B HUD, purchase price $160,000. This is the bottom half of the A to B HUD. I noted on here no EMD, earnest money deposits. One of the things I've mentioned many times in the past is find an attorney or closing agent who will hold a deposit for you and use it over and over again. That's the transactional dollars needed for this funding. It's the net, what was needed from the borrower or buyer, $159,794. The student had no money. I funded this transactional funding. Now here we are on the B to C HUD. This is sort of what I call the money shot because this is where the profit is made. Sale was for $203,000. Top half of the B to C HUD. Here's the bottom half of the B to C HUD. Once again, the end buyer, C buyer in this case, puts up a larger earnest money deposit than you put up as the investor. In this case, he put up $5,000. This is where I'm paid back for the transactional funds that I put up on the A to B side. And that's the net profit on the transaction, $37,745. That's a net profit. No money whatsoever in the deal. Now here's the student's first deal by assignment. I encourage students to be able to assign any contract they can rather than do a double closing. And the reason is very simple. If you don't have to double close, you make more money on the transaction. The caveat to that is there's a limit to what your original seller will allow you to make in his mind as a profit. Same thing with your end buyer. When you assign a contract, the end buyer, the original seller, are both going to see what you made as a profit. It can be a deal killer for you at the closing table. So here's the A to B, top half. Student got it under contract for $118,000. Remember, this is an assignment. Now, the earnest money deposit is $6,000. In this case, it should say A to C HUD because the investor buyer is not in this front page of the HUD. That $6,000 should have been put up by the end buyer C. This is page 2 of the HUD, top half. All these numbers are standard operating costs and expenses. It doesn't matter. What we're concerned about is the bottom half of the page 2 HUD. This is the bottom half of the page 2 HUD. In this case, the closing agent referred to the assignment fee of $7,000, which is the net profit to the student in this case. Okay, so here's the student's first deal. Again, it's no money whatsoever in the transaction. A to B HUD, top half, put it under contract for $67,500. I say put it under contract because although this is a closing HUD, this is real. He doesn't pay for it. We actually purchase it through transactional funding in most all of these cases, as a matter of fact, and then resell it the same day or the next day, depending on how long it takes to record the deed. So we put it under contract, and we're going to close at $67,500. This is the bottom half again of the A to B HUD, page 1. You see he has no earnest money deposit. How much money does he need to close? That's the transactional funds that are needed to close. Now, if you put it under contract for $67,500, very seldom, if ever, will it ever be that exact amount because you get a credit for accrued taxes and you have closing costs. So the number is going to be either smaller or larger depending on the taxes, what you actually contracted it for. So this is now the B to C HUD, and he sold it for $85,000. Top half of the B to C HUD, let's look at the bottom half. Once again, here is a $5,000 earnest money deposit from the end buyer C. The reason it's $5,000 is that's the most he could get, which is fine. The end buyer doesn't come to closing. You're going to collect his $5,000 earnest money deposit, and you will lose whatever earnest money deposit you pledged to the original A seller. This is the transactional funding or funds that were paid back to me as I funded the deal. And bottom line, that's the profit, $15,360 on the transaction. Now here's a very interesting one, which is going to be somewhat controversial. I hear about this almost on a weekly basis from attorneys who say this can't be done. Likewise, on an almost weekly basis, we do it, and legally. So the seller didn't come to closing. This is going to be an occurrence that you're going to run into the longer you're in the business. So the seller didn't come to closing, and what we did is we foreclosed them out of the property. And if you have an attorney that's sitting here looking at this and he's saying to you it can't be done, and we're going to go through it and show you exactly what happened. We foreclosed, paid court registry, and a bunch of other court costs. Now if you're saying to yourself, well, you had to pay for the property. Yeah, we did. Of course we did. We don't get it for free. And the seller's funds stay in the court registry until he applies for them and gets them back. But once we go to foreclosure, he has to pay our expenses and our attorney's expenses. Then what we did afterwards is we petitioned the court for all of the seller's costs that would have been on the A to B HUD that seller now had to assume. And I'll show you how that worked out in the end here for us. Where's the A to B HUD? There is no A to B HUD. The seller didn't come to closing. So all you're going to see is effectively a B to C HUD when we actually sold the property. So here is the B to C HUD, top half. That's the sales price, $206,000. There's the transactional funding that was paid back. How was it paid back? Well, the $144,000 was paid into the court registry. So here as we sell it, it has to be paid back. Now it says transactional funding. Not quite correct. It was actually a hard money loan because it extended out a little longer than we wanted it to, but nonetheless, we're owning the property. We're selling the property. This is the sale of the property. That's the partial net profit. After all's said and done, paid back the money that we paid to buy it, purchase it, $40,679 profit. But it doesn't end there. The court's going to return to us a little over $15,000 of the seller's funds that are being held in the court registry for an additional profit. So the net profit on this deal was $55,679. It probably is going to be over $56,000 when it's said and done. The aha moment on this transaction is this seller never came to the original closing. He walked out before he got there and said, I'm not closing. Here's a student's first deal by assignment also. Different student, first deal. So here's the A to B, top half of the HUD. Again, this A to B HUD is actually an A to C HUD because of the assignment. $140,000 purchase price, $5,000 earnest money deposit. Now remember, that $5,000 earnest money deposit is not put up by the student. It's been put up by the end buyer C. So what we're going to look at now is the page 2 of this closing statement. I skipped the top half in this case, went to the bottom half because that's where the money is. Here again we see an assignment fee, and it's $15,000 net profit. People ask me all the time, well, how big an assignment fee can you take without the end buyer, saying it's too much, the original seller saying it's too much? That's in the mind of the beholder. So in this case, $15,000 is what we consider a threshold. However, some people will say, that's too much money. How do they get too much money? They will tell you, I don't care how much money you make on it until they see that. When they see that, they can change their mind. We had a student who called me and said, I know you told me not to do it, but I did it. I got a property. I'm assigning it for $85,000 profit. I said, what made you decide to do that? He said, because if I double closed, I had to pay another $5,600 in closing costs. So I'm saving myself $5,600. The outcome of that transaction was, when he got to the closing table, the original seller realized what he was making. It didn't matter that he had said to him beforehand, I love the price you gave me. I'm happy. He wasn't happy when he saw the $85,000 paper profit that the student in this case would have made for 15 minutes of work, if you call it that. Of course, the end buyer, who had said, I don't care what you paid for it, I love the price, also said, no, we're not closing. The long and short of the story is we did close, but wound up getting only a $20,000 profit to walk away with. That's the ultimate example of penny wise and pound foolish. So here's 3 deals. In this case, the student got a property under contract and there was 2 more behind it. He asked the fabled question, oh, by the way, do you have any other properties? And the answer was, yeah, happen to have 2 more. So this is deal 1 of 3. Paid $114,000 for the property. Again, no earnest money deposit. Why? The closing agent that we work with, there's a number of them, will hold an escrow deposit and use it for every one of the contracts. Now, why is it not shown on the HUD? The reason is if it was shown on the HUD, He would then have to give the closing agent back the $1,000 each time. So it's simply a convenience for us. There's the transactional funding needed. Again, student had no money to do these three deals. This is the B2C HUD, top half, sold it for $132,000. Here's the bottom half now of the B2C HUD, $5,000 earnest money deposit. Why has it been that we've seen so many $5,000 earnest money deposits on the B2C side? It's just a coincidence. If they could have gotten more, they would have gotten more. This is what they asked for, and they were given that. These earnest money deposits are going to become more important, as you'll see in a minute or two on another upcoming transaction. There's the transactional funding that was paid back. The bottom line, it's a net profit of $13,328, 0 cents. Now, if you're saying to yourself, how can it be 0 cents? The closing agent plays with the pennies on one of these things. It doesn't matter. These are real HUDs, real people, and real profits. So here's deal number 2 of the 3 deals he completed. I'm going to mention this now because if you're saying to yourself, wow, these guys are supermen, well, they certainly did a super job. They're normal people just like you and I and the other students. And if you look on my other channel, you can see interviews I did with these people. But this particular person, and I said to him in the interview, as you're going to see, he netted over $103,000. And I said to him, that's a life-changing event, isn't it? And he said, it sure is. So here's deal number 2 of the 3 deals. Paid $196,000 for it. Again, what did he pay for it? Nothing. The reason he paid nothing is because I did the transactional funding. You're saying to yourself, wow, that's pretty lucky you do that. It's because I get paid for it. I charge students for it. I charge the public for it. And it's available to you no matter what state you're in. Whether this is Wyoming or New York or California, the HUD looks the same and you wouldn't know the difference unless I had told you where it came from. Here's the bottom half. Once again, no earnest money deposit. What's important here is the transactional funding needed is $197,000. So let's go on to the B2C side once again. He sold it for $240,000. $5,000 earnest money deposit. It's getting to be cranky with this $5,000. It's okay. Here I am being paid back to transactional funding. There's the net profit on the deal, $37,000 and change. First one was $13,000, so we're right now at $50,000 net profit same day. And here's the final deal number 3 of the 3 deals. Paid $160,000 for the property, no earnest money deposit. The transactional funding needed was $179,000. Sold it for $240,000. That's top half of the B2C side. Bottom half of the B2C side, $5,000 earnest money deposits, almost getting to be a joke of this $5,000. There's the transactional funding returned to me. But here's the bottom line on the deal. With no money whatsoever in the deal, his net profit is $53,000. The ones I gave you, the first 2, netted $50. This one netted $53, $103,000. Now, can anyone do this? No, not anyone can do this. Ordinary people can do it if they have an extraordinary persistence in getting deals done and finding them, and they have somebody to help support them to tell you how to do the deals. And very importantly, you need a buyer's list. Who are you going to sell these deals to if you get them? You could have the greatest deals in the world. If you can't sell them, there are no deals. Okay, here's a short sale. For you people that do short sales, there's some keys in here of why this particular short sale, in fact, is a large short sale. Okay, after much is said and done about it, we purchased the property, $80,000. Now, this is not the contract with the homeowner. This is what was approved by the lender. No earnest money deposit. Same old, same old. That's the transactional funding that was needed. Now, some lenders, and I don't want to mention names because I just don't want to mention names. They look at a proof of funds. If it's my proof of funds and I say to them I can close and so on and so forth, they say no. No, we want the buyer to have the money in his account. Well, you're not going to find a transactional funder where, in fact, the money has to be in his account. The option to that, if you come into it, is to, whoever the transactional funder is and they agree to it, is to go on title. And that squashes that stupid idea that the funds have to be in the buyer's account. But again, you have to find a transactional funder that will work with you on that, or most importantly, use private money. Friends and family to begin with, raise private money. So again, this is the B2C HUD, top half, sold it for $170,000. How did he do that? He got a great deal on the short sale. The lender sent out 2 appraisals and they approved the price. Now, we had the end buyer put up an $8,000 earnest money deposit. Well, great. We broke this chain of $5,000. Doesn't matter. There's the transactional funding that was returned. And the bottom line here, the most important part of this entire HUD statement, Net profit $74,212. Now this is pretty interesting because the entire profit on this property was made by collecting 2 earnest money deposits when the end buyers decided not to close. It's very, very important if you're going to be a real estate investor that you know how to get the earnest money deposit from your end buyer. And I say that not tongue-in-cheek because it's very obvious if he doesn't close that he owes you the money. Well, it's very obvious to you. To him, he's going to come up with excuses like, you didn't perform, you didn't give me clear and marketable, you didn't. Give me my escrow deposit back. The problem with that is you're going to lose yours if you can't close. So you need to learn how to get his earnest money deposit. And to do that, you need to talk to the closing agent and say, what else do you need in writing to make sure that I collect that guy's earnest money deposit? If he says to you, there's really no way to get it, you're going to have to go to mediation, stuff like that. I say all the time, find another closing agent who will work with you, who in a paragraph or 2 or number of sentences, you release them from the liability of releasing that earnest money deposit. And both you and you, meaning you as the investor, and your end buyer sign that. It says, I agree to give up the earnest money deposit if I don't close timely, and I hold harmless the closing agent for releasing the earnest money deposit. And again, you're going to have to work this out with your closing agent. But in this case, I'll show you what happened. We paid $180,000 for the property. And I say we paid this amount of money because we decided, because of the high activity and calls on this wholesale deal, and the short time we had to close, and the fact we didn't have somebody under contract for it, we decided to hold it in inventory. Close on it, hold it in inventory. And I'm going to say this to you, listen, no good deed goes unpunished. Now, I'm the one that actually put up the money to hold that, and I got punished, so to speak, because I didn't see all the pictures of the property. Had I seen them all, I would have passed on closing on it. And that means we would not have risked the earnest money deposit because we were still in the inspection period. But nonetheless, let's follow through and see what happened in this deal that was not a deal. This is the transactional funding amount that was needed, $181,000 to close, and we're closed. So now we own the property and we put it out to sell it because now we have enough time to market the property effectively. Came forward and did not close. Now remember, that doesn't take 2 or 3 days. That takes weeks and weeks. And we collected their earnest money deposit. One was $6,000 and one was $8,000. Actually, the $8,000 was part of a $10,000 earnest money deposit. We said we're going to take the earnest money deposit. He said, oh, no, he had all these reasons. So he had his attorney call us. And we said to the attorney, look, here's the deal. You're not going to get any attorney's fees. We're going to take the $10,000, so on and so forth. And his response was, how about taking $8,000? And we did. We said, okay. You twisted our arm, so he got back $2,000 of the $10,000. We had a total of $14,000 credit from earnest money deposits sitting in the account before we went to closing. It shows we sold it for $200,000, but $10,000 of that was actually from a wholesaler who brought a buyer. So we sold it for $190,000. Now there's the transactional funding. It was paid back. I charged a very small amount of interest on it because just to make the transaction a profitable transaction. There was no reason to hurt the student in charging them excessive amounts like points and interest and so on and so forth. Now there's what looks like the profit on the transaction from the HUD statement. However, remember I mentioned earlier that Hurricane Irma came through? We had insurance on the property, which cost us money. That's an expense of doing it. But all insurance has a deductible. So we did a bunch of the work ourselves in terms of cleaning it up. I'm not going to go into the details, but the bottom line is from the hurricane damage, cleanup, the insurance, and the wholesale fee, which were paid outside of closing legally, it just says on the HUD, POC, paid outside of closing. The net profit when the smoke cleared was $9,496. Nothing to sneeze at. But if I had to do it again, I'd be very careful about going ahead and closing. We could have done lipstick on a pig, which would have meant, besides where we were in terms of putting money into it, we would have had another $15,000 or $20,000 in it, and we would have been carrying it for months. So we decided to take this nominal profit, which was the result of the $14,000 of net earnest money deposits that we collected. So here's a summary of those 10 transactions. Each one of those, I went through them with you already. The total of those transactions, $318,000. The average profit was $31,821 on the deals. So if you're saying to yourself, man, those are astronomical wholesale profits, well, I'm going to say to you, you're right. But if you learn how to do wholesaling the proper way, you should be averaging $15,000 to $20,000 on every deal you do, no matter where you are in the country. And if you're in states like California and so on, you should be averaging at least $30,000 to $40,000 or $50,000 on a deal. The general concept is I have to make that much money by rehabbing the property. I'm going to say to you, as you look at these profits that we made, any number of these could have been larger than the actual rehabber who bought it from us, rehabbed it for 3 months, and then took 3 months to sell it. That's why we wholesale. Even if you're a rehabber, what we teach you to do, learn how to cherry pick the best wholesale deals. Right now what you're doing is you don't look for them yourself. You don't have time to do that. You have other people who are wholesalers sell you the properties. They have no market risk. They have no money in the deal, so to speak. You as a rehabber who love the concept of, man, I took this junker and turned it into this magnificent thing, have to realize the bottom line is, did I make money? Or did you make enough for the aggravation you went through? And if you learn how to wholesale, you'll be able to wholesale deals in between the rehabs, especially for new students coming into that want to be rehabbers. The issue is I can borrow the money, I'm being eaten alive by expenses every month, and I have to wait to sell that property before I can do the next one. So that means you're limited to how many deals you can do a year based on how fast you can sell them. If you learn how to wholesale, you can continue to wholesale between deals and expedite your learning curve and your cash flow immensely. So that's why we teach people as a ground rule, here's how to wholesale. And there's 5 types of wholesaling. So as you learn those, you can become very proficient in doing less and less work for actually more and more money. I'm not an attorney, a CPA, or a realtor, so any information you derive from this presentation is not to be construed as legal or accounting advice. Also, under the Federal Trade Commission required disclaimer, you cannot talk about an average of any results unless you can show all of the results, and that's what I've done here. These are real numbers, real HUD statements, and actually you can see the students talk about these deals in about 4 or 5 of them. So I'm Dave Dinkel, and I wish you limitless success in everything you do. Thanks very much for joining me.